Greetings, this is Christine Van Pelt on Gibson County, Indiana, State Coordinator and Lead Recording Secretary for the Indiana Assembly. And this is Gen Ed Wednesday. We're continuing with Brent Allen Winters, Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a common lawyer comments, clause by clause. You can find this and other works of Brent Allen Winters at his website, commonlawyer.com. Do support him. He is on Terre Haute, Indiana. He has not presented to the Indiana Assembly, but he has contributed for decades of his works within the common law. So please do look for that. Also in Anna's Article 4400, our court system, she states Brent Allen Winters, his works, as well as he has the excellence of the common law. So let's go ahead and we'll continue. We're going to go through the study guide questions from last week's reading with those answers. Then we'll do the recording of the reading for this week, and then we'll go through the questions for the study guide for that, so that next week we follow up with those answers. All right, here we go. All right, so again, pages 189 to 199. Here's the YouTube link, as well as here is the link to be able to gain the materials yourself. And within each call, it has the presentation link of what all's presented here within the description of the video. All right, so we'll move forward. Okay, so question 1. Our Constitution guarantees the right to trial by jury, but like Magna Carta, never explaining because people were wholly familiar with their right to jury trial. Number 2, in fact, to enjoy the right, the plaintiff in a non-criminal case must demand trial by jury in his first pleading. Number 3, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. Number 4, the right to a speedy and public trial is the common law's weapon against government's jailing of those whom it, in ever fickle whim, disapproves for as long as it likes. Number 5, the speedy trial right is fundamental because without it, the freedom of every defendant awaiting criminal trial, whether jailed or bailed, is disabled. Number 6, mere indictment will subject him to public scorn and deprive him of employment, and force curtailment of his speech, associations, and participation in unpopular causes. Number 7, Magna Carta says, quote, guaranteed trial speedily without delay, whether free or bondman or woman, old or young. Number 8, today, each of the 50 states guarantees to those it accuses of crimes the right to a speedy trial. Number 9, moreover, the right to a speedy trial is a matter of due process. If too much time passes before trial, evidence grows stale or is lost, and sham proceedings replace due process. Number 10, the disabilities can impair the accused's ability to mount a defense. Number 11, in fact, where an Amendment 6 right is denied or violated, law requires no showing of injustice or injury, deeming injury to the defendant foregone. Number 12, by Amendment 6, the framers intend to bar the civil law tradition from our courts because it has secrecy for its foundation. Number 13, trials must be public so the people and press will have free access to hear and discuss freely. In fact, a public trial must by definition be spoken because it is before the jury. 14, Nowadays, however, prosecutors in American courts deny with high-handed impunity the right to a speedy trial and public trial, where even some judges, in callous disregard of due process as fair play, brook secret proceedings and sealing of court documents. Number 15. In the inquisitorial court, the roles of prosecutor, defender, and judge are combined in one person or group of persons. Amendment 6 continued. By an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. Number 17. In fact, the common law demands local trials before local jurors, close by, where the acts complained of are said to have been done so that witnesses and other evidence is available. Number 18, thus in criminal trials, common sense disqualifies government employees from jury duty because such a dependent will favor government, his provider. Number 19, the mere appearance of bias, says the Supreme Court, is bias. Number 20. Amendment 6 continued, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Okay, yes, here we go. 21. Civil law is law-driven. The government's legislative will controls. Common law is fact-driven. The facts control. 22. Amendment 6 continued, to be confronted with the witnesses against him. 23. Going under oath, a lying witness opens himself up for punishment if caught lying. Going under cross-examination, he tries to evade capture. 24. As often as not, such a witness is not the defendant's enemy, but someone whose testimony of otherwise harmless facts the prosecutor wants to twist against the defendant. 25. Cross-examination seeks simple admission. The questions eclipse the answers. 26. Cross-examination is a creature of the common law, the child of its adversarial personality, grown to strength, an under-skilled command, the fearsome foe of falsehood and fast friend of truth. Number 28. In some human weak... Okay, that we just did that one. Okay. Nope. My apologies. Pardon. In some, human weaknesses erode testimony, most of which falls short of the whole truth. 28. The cross-examiner's questions, on the other hand, can assume as much as he dares, as long as he rests his questions on some perception of fact. 29. Cross-examination, being a creature of the common law, has no part in civil tribunals. Its ideal of fair play are no part of the civil law's country's culture. Thus, it is found only in the handful of the world's common law countries. 30. Indeed, fair play is the fundamental difference between common law and Roman civil law, dominating most all the rest of the world. 31. To have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor. 32. This compulsory process clause guarantees to the criminal's defendant the court's power to compel witnesses by summons under threat of contempt in his favor to either testify, and that statement continues. Number 33, Amendment 6 continued, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. 34, most defendants facing federal criminal trial are, like most Americans, without enough money to retain a winsome defense lawyer. 35, common law, however, deems such divided loyalty, no matter how slight, to be disloyalty. 36, assistance of counsel is constitutionally sound only if effective. And then 37, two changes are needful. Let's see. Where are those? Two changes are needful. Stop federal prosecution of everything except the 4 crimes the Constitution enumerates. Second, use criminal fees to fund at competitive rates the unmoneyed, insolvent defendants, choice of counsel from among seasonal trial lawyers. All right, so that was the questions for there. And now we'll go ahead and we'll move forward with the reading for the pages for this week. So there are pages 199 to 206. There's a link for YouTube, and we'll go ahead and play that recording as well. Greetings, this is Christine Van Peldon, Gibson County, Indiana, State Coordinator and Lead Recording Secretary for the Indiana Assembly. And we are continuing with Brent Allen Winters' Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a Common Lawyer Comments, clause by clause. And you can go to his website, commonlawyer.com, to purchase this, the reading and study guide, as well as other materials that Anna has identified in Article 4400. So this is very supportive in this, along with other readings and works from Brett Allen Winters, is supportive of getting our courts up and going. So let's go ahead and get moving, and we'll move on to our, here we go. All right. Amendments 5 and 6, presumption of innocence. Our courts recognize the presumption of innocence, i.e. innocence unless proven guilty, to be a fundamental right. Though our Constitution never cites the right, courts say that it arises from Amendments 5 and 6, having always been the common law standard. Further, Amendment 14 requires state courts observe it also. The presumption of innocence stresses the government's burden to prove each element of the offense charged beyond any reasonable doubt, and that the accused, being innocent, need never prove his innocence at trial. Alright. The presumption recognizes that most people are not criminals. Accordingly, it automatically attaches at trial, requiring that each juror and the judge begin by presuming that the prosecutor cannot support his case. To ensure this protection is respected, 3 related rules govern common law criminal trials. First, the government bears the entire burden to prove whether the crime charged was indeed done and whether the defendant did it. Second, the defendant has no burden of proof whatsoever. He does not have to testify, call witnesses, or present any other evidence. And if the defendant chooses not to testify or present evidence, his decision cannot be used against him. Third, neither any juror nor the judge is to draw any inferences against the defendant from his having been charged with a crime, his being in court, his being represented by a lawyer, or his choosing to remain silent to not testify. The juror must decide the case solely on evidence presented at the trial. Lord Sankey calls this duty of the prosecution the golden thread running through the common law tradition of criminal trials. Throughout the web of the English criminal law, one golden thread is always to be seen: the duty of the prosecution to prove the prisoner's guilt. Willington v. DDPAC 42, 1935. Reasonable doubt of guilt. Comment. In a criminal trial, a just verdict demands clear understanding of reasonable doubt of guilt, but such understanding eludes jurors. 23% of instructed jury members believed that when the weight of circumstantial evidence was equally balanced between guilt and innocence, the defendant should be convicted. Only 50% of the jurors understood that the defendant did not have to present any evidence of his innocence. 10% were uncertain as to what the presumption of innocence meant, and 2% believed that the burden of proof of innocence lay with the defendant. We conclude that burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence, and reasonable doubt should be explained to the jury. 904 Column L. Rev. 1716, 1723. From before America's birth, common law's requirement of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for conviction has been the standard in criminal cases. In 1970, the Supreme Court accorded constitutional dignity to this standard. In the case of Winship 397, U.S. 358, 1970, jurors nevertheless failed to distinguish proof by a preponderance of the evidence from proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Therefore, in order for jurors to satisfy principles of due process, the court must give them simple, clear instructions concerning reasonable doubt. Even if a juror believes the accused is likely guilty but remains a doubt that is reasonable, the law demands that he deliver a not guilty verdict. All during a criminal trial, the innocence of the accused is a fact by law. This law bars the juror, the prosecutor, and the court from subjecting the defendant's innocence to any test. The juror must instead test the government's attempts to prove guilt. In short, the juror must test the government's accusations, never the defendant's innocence. Thus, the test of the juror's verdict is never his certainty of the defendant's innocence, but doubt of the defendant's guilt. A guilty verdict requires certainty of guilt beyond any reasonable doubt, a standard having two parts. First, does the juror doubt the guilt of the accused? Second, if so, is that doubt reasonable? If it is, not guilty must be the verdict, but what qualifies as reasonable? Lest the juror allow government to take life, liberty, or property from innocent accused, the juror must know the answer. For a juror's doubt to be reasonable, he must infer it from fact or facts, and it must appear reasonable. First, the juror must ask himself if he hesitates to bring in a guilty verdict. If so, what is the cause of hesitation? Once he has identified the cause, he must then ask if that cause is a fact or facts, a truth which evidence presented at trial causes him to believe. If his doubt of guilt is not based on some fact, it is no more than a hunch, and therefore unreasonable. Second, if his doubt is based on some fact, he then must ask if it is reasonable. Reasonableness is not a matter of logic, but a word of estimation, signifying fairness according to the common sense of the facts at hand. Reason, by contrast, is logic, but never the final test of truth, because, though precise, it may be based on falsehood, wrongly believed fact. By having a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt, the juror can be sure he is innocent. But by doubting the defendant's innocence, the juror can never be sure guilt. Bottom line, only conclusions inferred, reasoned, from fact can be reasonable. Thus, one must always test conclusions of logic for reasonableness in light of available facts. The arithmetic student, for example, knows to test his answer gotten by logic against the bounds of reasonableness. For example, if neither of the numbers in the subtraction problem he faces is more than 5, he knows an answer over 50 is unreasonable. Likewise, he may not know at first glance the answer to an algebra problem, but given the constants, he will know the range beyond what the answer cannot be called unreasonable. In order for a conclusion to be reasonable, it must be inferred from facts. The common law, therefore, frowns upon defining reasonable doubt as a doubt for which reasons can be given. Indeed, many reasons gotten by tight logic can be given for a conclusion, but be based on a mistake, presumption, false appearance of fact, fancy, or hunch. Simply put, only that reason for doubt of guilt resting on evidence, facts, presented at trial is reasonable doubt. In short, reasonable doubt is a doubt founded upon one's sense of overall fairness, using facts concerned and pondered. A fact, says Wigmore, is any act or condition of things assumed or believed to have happened or existed. To sum up, the juror's not guilty verdict never demands certainty of innocence, but only reasonable doubt of guilt. In all events, the jury has an unreviewable and irreversible power to acquit in disregard of the instructions of the law on the law given by the trial judge. U.S. v. Daughtry, 473 F. 2D, 1113, 1139, 1972. Amendment 7. In suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Comment. Amendment 7 enforces 3 rights: the right to trial by jury in a non-criminal case, the exclusive right and power of the jury to decide what are the facts of the case and what the rules of the common law shall be followed respecting those findings of fact. In sum, Amendment 7 bars any court from reconsidering any fact the jury has decided, unless our common law, that is, due process, demands it. Remember, says Stryker, a common law trial, unlike a civil law inquisition, admiralty, canon, martial, and international law, is more of a fact suit than a lawsuit. The problem confronting the common law jury is not so much what the law is as what happened. Because Amendment 7 never mentions the jury's power to bring in the verdict, we look to the common law. The jury, once it has decided the facts, also has power to judge the application of the law and to deliver the verdict. Otherwise, the judge would have the power to find the verdict. In fact, even if the judge directs the verdict, the jury can by right, refuse his direction. See this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 76, sections 11 to 12, 14, 20, and comments. Among the limited governments of men, who has the final say of what is lawful and what is not? Our Constitution never finds such a human arbiter of right and wrong among its 3 branches of government, because these are co-equal, each having equal power of final decision and fully duty-bound to use judgment independent of the other 2 branches in deciding whether its own doings or those of the other 2 branches are constitutional, lawful. But the findings of the jury in single cases trump all 3 branches of government, the way of the common law from its earliest days. Relying upon the finality of the common law jury as the country's court of conscience, our Constitution establishes the jury as supreme in particular cases above the co-equal judicial, executive, and legislative branches. Indeed, New York state, reflecting this common law principle, calls its trial courts Supreme Courts. California calls its trial courts superior courts. Each federal court draws its judicial power from our Constitution, either by its direct grant, as does the Supreme Court, or by indirect grant through Congress, as do all other federal courts. Because the Constitution is the source spring of every federal court's authority, no court is greater than the Constitution. Bottom line, to alter our Constitution is a constitutional impossibility. Therefore, never think that any judge has. In spite of any misapplied provisions, the principles of the Constitution, being first principles of common law government, never change. Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Comment. Any bail or fine is excessive if it is impossible for the defendant to pay it without denying him and his family food, clothing, and shelter. Among nations, the land of the free now jails the world's highest percentage of its population. Half of those jailed in America. It is silly to adorn the caging of men and women with the term incarcerate, and the cages used to cage them with the terms penitentiary and correctional facility are there on nonviolent and victimless charges, often for acts merely offensive to popular sensibilities, such as petty drug possessions or taking a tax deduction the government dislikes. See Brent Allen Winter's Excellence of the Common Law, subsection 4.11, discussing the false foundation of the penitentiary system. At bottom, this clause forbids ruining a man's dignity and worth in the eyes of others by inflicting punishment beyond reasonable preset limits. Thus, punishment beyond the degree of wrong done is cruel and unusual. This includes common law's bar against torture. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth is like a principle. Limiting punishment by never allowing it to exceed the degree of the crime. Even in punishment, government must preserve the dignity of the one punished. See Deuteronomy 25:3. In fact, since each person carries God's dignity by God's image, to carry punishment too far brings God's wrath. To trespass a person's dignity offends God's dignity. By like principle, to never punish for wrongdoing is to treat the offender as less than human, as though God has never entrusted him with responsibility. Amendment 5's reference to taking of life acknowledges that the death penalty is not cruel and unusual as long as it results from having followed due process. Finally, remember that our Constitution empowers the general government to punish only 4 crimes: treason, counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, and offenses against the law of nations. And of these 4, it defines only treason. See J. Madison and T. Jefferson, Kentucky Resolution 1798 in this handbook comments accompanying Amendment 10, Article 1, Section 8, Amendment 11 holding unconstitutional federal punishment for crimes beyond these 4. Amendment 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained. Comment. Unlike modern European constitutions written in the law of the city fashion, Amendment 9 does not purport to be an exhaustive compendium of all of man's rights. Rather, Amendment 9 refers to our Declaration of 76 Laws of Nature, Declaration of 76, Section 1, and assumes 3 principles for interpretation for our Constitution. First, our Constitution does not list every fundamental common law right. In fact, the common law, unlike civil canon law, delights in discovering unforeseen fresh applications of our rights as these bob forth from the flux of human relationships. Remember, the chief purpose of our Constitution is to limit government so that we are free. Amendment Nine's acknowledgement of personal rights beyond those our Constitution lists is key to that purpose. Second, our Constitution never allows more powers to be added to its list of enumerated government powers, unless by amendment. Third, Amendment 9, as also all our Constitution, bestows no rights, but rather ensures that the Constitution's mention of one right never weakens any other. In a word, it bars government from misusing any right listed to deny or even belittle, disparage any other common law right. In sum, Amendment 9 bars government from whittling down any right to balance it against another or ignoring any unlisted right. Our Constitution delegates a few listed powers to the general government, but leaves innumerable powers in the states and the people. Our Constitution is a compact draft of common law limits for government and common law protections for individual rights. Government's reach ends where your rights begin. Unlike civil canon law codes, which cover most all the globe, the common law tradition is most law unwritten and even unknown until due process renders it up. Any written limits for common law government, such as our Constitution, are meant for clear guidance of free men to limit government by protecting their unwritten rights. Accordingly, you must always hold government to only those powers our Constitution enumerates, while never letting anyone limit your enjoyment of rights to only those certain rights enumerated in the Constitution. In sum, our Constitution limits the powers of government to those it enumerates, but never limits your rights. Why? Because the controlling purpose of our Constitution is to limit government at all points, but never the people. All right, so that was our reading for this week, and we'll see you on the next call. Peace and love. All right. Greetings, this is Christine Van. We'll go ahead and go through the questions real quick. Okay, so Amendment 5 and 6, presumption of innocence. 1. Though our Constitution never blanked the right, courts say that it arises from Amendments 5 and 6, having always been the common law blank. Number 2, the presumption of innocence stresses the government's blank to prove each element of the offense charged beyond any reasonable doubt, and that the accused being innocent need blank prove his innocence at trial. Number 3, third, neither any juror nor the judge is to draw any blank against the defendant from his having been charged with a crime, his being in court, his being represented by a lawyer, or his choosing to remain blank to not testify. Reasonable doubt of guilt for this section. Number 4, in a criminal trial, a just verdict blank clear understanding of reasonable doubt of guilt, but such understanding blank jurors. Number 5, 23% of instructed jury members believe that when the weight of blank evidence was equally blank between guilt and innocence, the defendant should be convicted. Number 6, from before America's birth, common law's requirement of guilt beyond a blank doubt for conviction has been the blank in criminal cases. In 1970, the Supreme Court accorded constitutional dignity to this standard. Number 7, jurors nevertheless fail to blank proof by a blank of the evidence from proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 8, in short, the juror must test the government's blank, never the defendant's blank. Number 9, thus the test of the juror's verdict, never his blank of the defendant's innocence, but blank of the defendant's guilt. Number 10, if it is blank, blank must be the verdict. Number 11, for a juror's doubt to be blank, he must blank it from the fact or facts, and it must appear reasonable. Number 12, thus one must always blank conclusions of blank for reasonableness in light of available facts. 13, the common law therefore blank upon defining reasonable doubt as a doubt for which blank can be given. Number 14, the juror can be sure the accused is innocent by having a reasonable doubt of his guilt, but he can never be sure the accused is guilty because he blank his blank. 15, to sum up, the blank, not guilty verdict never demands a blank of innocence, but only reasonable doubt of guilt. Amendment 7. 1, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed blank dollars, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise blank in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Number 2, in some Amendment 7, blank any court blank from blank any fact the jury has decided unless our common law, that is due process, demands it. Number 3, remember, says Stryker, a common law trial, unlike a civil law inquisition, admiralty, canon, martial, and international law, is more of a blank suit than a blank. Number 4, in fact, even if the judge blanked the verdict, the jury can by right blank his decision. Number 5, the jury has in blank and blank power to acquit in disregard of the instructions on the law given by the trial judge. Number 6, but the blank of the jury in single cases trump all blank branches of government, the way the common law from its earliest days. Number 7, relying upon the blank of the common law jury as the country's court of blank, our Constitution establishes the jury as supreme in particular cases above the co-equal judicial, executive, and legislative branches. Number 8, because the Constitution is the blank spring of every federal court's authority, no court is blank than the Constitution. 9, in spite of many misapplied provisions, the blank of the Constitution being first principles of common law government, blank change. Amendment 8, excessive blank shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual blank inflicted. Number 2, half of those jailed in America are there on nonviolent and blank charges, often for acts merely offensive to popular sensibilities, such as petty drug possession or taking a tax blank of the government dislikes. Number 3, in short, any punishment blank, the degree of blank done is cruel and unusual. This includes common law's bar against torture. Amendment 9. 1, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be blank to deny or disparage blank retained. Number 2, remember the chief purpose of our Constitution is to limit blank so that we will be blank. 3, in sum, Amendment 9 bars government from blank down any right to balance it against another or blank any unlisted right. Number 4, our Constitution blank a few listed powers to the general government but leaves blank powers in the states and the people. Number 5, our Constitution is a blank draft of common law limits for government and common law blank for individual rights. Government's reach ends where your rights begin. All right, that was the end of the study guide questions that you work through for next week with the reading. And again, we have on first and third Mondays, 6 p.m. Central, General Assembly and Militia Assembly meet. Second and fourth Mondays, the General Assembly and Militia Assembly meet. We will be having outreach calls the first Saturday of the month. We're scheduled through the end of March at this point in time, so we'll have first quarter of times. And new member orientations will be in December as well as the schedule is out there. The calls are being moved to free conference call. So you can come to freeconferencecall.com/wall/at home and it will take you to the wall here. And here's a few pages here of links and downloadable items. The schedule is here of already scheduled calls. You can click here for view all for each of those. When a call is in play, but you didn't want to actually get into the call or you were not invited to that call, you're able to come here to be able to listen to it via radio. So again, that is freeconferencecall.com/wall/at-home. All right, so I want to thank you all for taking the time with us on the call and going through the Declaration of 76, United States Constitution by Brent Allen Winters. And we'll see you on the next call. In peace and love.